Hi, everybody. Welcome to the special board meeting. It's 5:30. We're going to call the meeting to order right now. And Anita, can you just note the roll, please? Al, will you do the land acknowledgement for us?
Yes, thank you. Unishish to the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian people. We respectfully acknowledge them as the original inhabitants of Southeast Alaska. Bartlett Regional Hospital is located on the homelands of the Akwam. We're grateful to provide services in your ancestral homeland and to be part of this community.
Okay, just before we get started, I want everybody to know that she's going to note the roll, but everybody, all the board members are here. We have 7 in the room and we have a couple online, so all 9 of us are here. And just really quickly, we've gotten 40 here.
Please make sure your mics are on. It's on.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we've had 45 written public comments as to date. I know that us as a board got 19 comments today that we all read. So we've read all your comments and really appreciate it. Looking forward to the question and answering tonight. We'll go over the ground rules here in just a second. We're going to start with an approval of the agenda, Max. I know you had a little slight change.
Yeah, if we could add after number 7, a new number 8 for board comment right before adjournment.
Thank you, Max. Do we have any objections to that? No. All right, so we got a motion on the table. Second. Dr. Raster seconded, so the agenda is approved as it is. So I just want to talk quickly about our housekeeping here. So as you go out these doors right here, there's bathrooms, men and women bathrooms, emergency exits each way. You guys can go out the front or the back or back or the front, however you want to call it. So that's kind of just quick housekeeping, emergency exits or anything else like that. So I just want to say again, good evening and thank you all for being here, both in person and everybody online. Thank you very much too. As you all know, the hospital's current financial challenges underscore the need for the community engagement and the support to ensure its long-term sustainability. As the board navigates these financial duties, community input is crucial in shaping the future of healthcare services in Juneau. Our commitment to transparency and a community involvement reflects our dedication to providing the best possible care to our community. The Juneau and greater Southeast Alaska community, we believe, value a community hospital and want Bartlett to succeed and be healthy. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to hear public comment on the community healthcare priorities and services identified as non-core, meaning they fall outside of the hospital's enterprise fund. Tonight's meeting will begin with an overview of the state of the hospital's finances, including the proposed non-core program recommendations. We'll then move to the public question and answering on the information presented before the public taking comment. For those joining online, please be sure you are muted. You will have the opportunity to speak when called on during the question and answer period and the public comment. Any questions posed in the chat during the finance presentation will be addressed in the question and answer session. So how this will work is kind of like we did it the other night. Joe's going to do his presentation. Mac's going to give us a quick little history, a 2-minute history about Bartlett and where we're at. Then we'll turn it over to Joe, and then we'll do some question and answering. And then we'll probably take a short break after that. And then we'll come to the comment section. So when you come up here during the question and answering section, no comments, please, just flat out question and answers for us. It'll help us move the evening right along. Again, thank you all for being here. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Max.
Thanks, Kenny. I'm Max Mertz. Can you hear me all right? Max Mertz, I'm finance chair of Bartlett. I guess maybe a little bit of history, of course, but more kind of the next couple of months than anything else. But certainly Bartlett has enjoyed a long-term positive relationship with this community and has generally had strong operating results, strong community support. And it's been tested. A lot of hospitals around the country have been tested, during COVID and certainly since COVID. A lot of the way the hospital operated before COVID was kind of turned on its head. You think about BOPS and mental health, for example, the inpatient model of mental health was completely replaced with an outpatient model of mental health services. And so returning to some of the more traditional kind of services is a challenge. And we're also finding that what we found is that after COVID and, really through COVID, a lot of the financial support that was there for some of these programs isn't there now. And that's what leads us here. But I think it's important to understand that we have very strong leadership now. Eden Warden, our CEO, he has a long, deep service and financial and also executive management at hospitals. And he came in with a kind of unique perspective. Most recently, he was head of Virginia Mason Franciscan Health, where he had been, and he kind of retired, and we pulled him out of retirement to come here. And then Joe Warner, who you'll be hearing from here in a minute. Joe has returned to Bartlett after having been here in the late 2010s, went down to work for a hospital in Oregon, and has come back to work for us here and is extremely experienced in healthcare management, understands the lay of the land. Kim McDonald sitting here, our CEO, is understands Bartlett, has been around Bartlett for a very long time and the issues that we're facing. And so the team is uniquely, I think, ready to meet this challenge. On the slides, and Joe will go through these a little bit more, but slide 4 has got a timeline. And I think we should make sure that we're not looking at the timeline as an end, but almost the beginning. A lot of these things that we're looking at are new. Wildflower Court is new to Bartlett. I mean, we just started building Wildflower Court late in the winter. We haven't even billed $1 yet on hospice and home care, not $1, because we're still waiting for our provider number. We've gone through all the administrative, work to get our provider number, and they've done their on-site visits and so forth, surveys, and so we're feeling our way along here. And as we look at these different services, we're trying to figure out, can Bartlett do this? Does this make sense? Because certainly Bartlett needs to be able to strive and be strong. And I think to a person, as a board, we all want to, see Bartlett around to be a strong independent hospital for years and years to come. So you'll see us develop financial plans around what we're doing, not only with the core, but also some of these non-core services as we've defined them into the future. And, the comments that we've received so far are super important. And, they reinforce the importance of these various programs to us, and we're listening. So we appreciate y'all showing up again tonight and the folks online. And with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Max. Sure.
Thank you, Kenny. Thank you for the presentation. I just want to start by thanking everyone for coming out. This presentation will be slightly abbreviated from the first one, so we had quite a bit of feedback on the first presentation that was a little bit too detailed. So I won't go into the same depth as I did the first time. All that information that presentation is on our website available for viewing. If you guys want to go review our first one, if you have questions on those, we'll be happy to answer those. You can submit those to the portal we have. So the driving factor of these conversations is the increasing financial pressures that Bartlett's faced over the past few years. And as you can see on this graph, in FY17, FY18, Bartlett had nearly a $10 million cash flow from operations. So this is the dollars we receive from the patient care that go to support programs and capital replacements, development aid programs, things of that nature. We saw a decline in FY19, where it almost went negative, and then with 2020, it dropped below the break-even point where we were actually outflowing cash from operations on an annual basis thereafter. So what's some of the key areas of focus we have are process improvement. So we're doing a lot of work about on cost center improvement. We're doing some lean processes with management. I'll talk about our FT process, conduct review, and some of that in future slides. We'll go over each of the programs at a higher level than I did prior and try to hit the high points, hopefully offering more time for questions and comments. So this is the timeline Max referenced. And it goes over kind of the process we follow to date. We've had 3 different meetings, May 10th, 28th, and 29th. We had our first public comment period on June 4th, and this one tonight. The comments will continue to be accepted to June 19th. And then the packet and the review will be done at the Bartlett Finance Committee on June 24th. We will take those proposed recommendations and any action items to the board on June 25th at that point. And so this is a graph we shared that shows the various programs that we'll be talking about tonight. I want to start on the left and kind of go over the hospital, what we consider the enterprise fund, which is the hospital, wildfire report, and BOPS. And so when you look at the hospital and the core program as a standalone, you would see between direct revenues and direct expenses, we have an operating loss of $5.6 million on our core. We do have allocations that help support other programs below that. We have an overhead allocation of $3 million and a facilities allocation of $3.6 million. So we have a bottom line there after allocations of $1.2 million for the hospital, wildfire report, and BOPS. The hospital, in order to be sustainable, should achieve a 3% operating margin on an annual basis. So with that being said, the operating margin for the hospital should be closer to the $4.5 billion mark on this. So we do have work to do on that. And some of the things we're doing for the hospital and the enterprise fund is we have an FTE committee, so we're reviewing every FTE as it's requested. As people leave the organization, we're reviewing those positions. As we have contractors, contracts come up to term, we're reviewing the need for those. So we're looking at everybody that steps into this hospital before we accept that person. We're also looking at all the contracts we have for services provided. So we touch base on this. We have Zoom contracts, we have Teams contracts, so we need both of those. So we're looking at getting rid of unnecessary or duplicative services that we purchase through those contracts. We're focusing mostly on national contracts, not trying to impact the local economy or going through that process. But another thing that we're looking at with the hospital that we mentioned during the first meeting is the potential of going to critical access hospital status. And so that is a payment designation to Medicare. And so when you look at Bartlett as an entity today, we're basically providing services that a critical access hospital would provide today. So that designation would be no decrease in services at the hospital level. We'd be able to do the same things we're doing today. It would just change how Medicare pays us. With some management, obviously, and some programs we have to review along the way.
Hey, Joe, before you continue, what's BOPS?
BOPS,
Yes.
Bartlett Outpatient Psychiatric Services.
Thank
you. So the first program I'm going to go over is RRC, which is Rainforest Recovery Center. That is our 16-bed residential and outpatient substance abuse clinic. As I said, I'm going to be a little bit more high level, so I won't go through all the details for this program. So this was a program that the hospital took over from CBJ in 2000. CBJ had been running this program at annual losses of close to $1 million for about 7 years prior to that. When we received the program, it also came with some subsidization before the tax dollars. So those will be shown on the next graph. It currently operates at base staffing, so the ability to change the cost or the expenses in that facility are minimal from the insurance point of view. In 2024, if you're operating at 100% capacity, it would be barely enough to cover the direct expenses of the program during this fiscal year. And we'll just click over to the next slide to show you this one. This is the RRC subsidization slide, and the city was I was able to bounce these numbers off what the CBJ has and confirm them, if anyone has any questions about that. So you can see from FY '03 through FY 15-16, we received somewhere between $1 million and $1.2 million. And then in 17, 18, and 19, the allocation was increased, where we were almost receiving $1.5 million a year. And then in FY 20, everyone knows that COVID happened, and with the reduction in services provided and services needed other places, those tax dollars were redirected by CBJ to other programs at that point. We've seen reductions over the last couple of years, and in FY 24 and FY 25, we're budgeted to receive $0 for the operations of RRC. Going back to this slide, this is all the detail. I'm not going to go over this like I did last time. So if you guys have any questions, please review the information that's provided up front and ask questions when that time comes. But the board's recommendation is to determine whether a third party can be identified to take the program over in full from Bartlett. If this is not realistic, closure of the program. This program could be retained if the CBJ simply chose to provide a permanent subsidy. This is a difficult financial recommendation where there's no way of reflection of the individuals who provide or receive these services. We're moving on to home health and hospice. These are both new programs to Bartlett. As Max stated, we have yet to bill for our dollar. We have received our P10 provider number for the hospice service, but we're in the process of setting up billing services through a contractor that was decided on. So hopefully we'll be getting those bills out the door in the coming weeks to come. As we look at both these programs, we have the revenues and expenses up there. And when we combine the two programs, an operating margin or an operating loss of $1.4 million between the two programs combined. We like to look at it in tandem because the staff we use to cover one program is used to cover all for others, so you can't really split the two without, I guess, changing out. So we can't staff one and not the other. When we started doing overhead allocations, you can see that there's just overhead allocation. There's no facilities. This is due to both of these programs being housed in rented facilities, which are included in the direct expenses. And so with that, we have an allocated operating loss of about $2.2 million between the two programs combined. When we look at these programs, there could be some operational impacts if we chose to move forward with closure. A lot of our patients are discharged to both home health and hospice from the inpatient units. And so it's something that's kind of near and dear to our case management for a way to get patients off the hospital floor. Going back just a little bit, we did take over these programs last year, as I stated. They were both ran by CCS prior to Bartlett taking over. And one of the big impacts with that is we brought all the staff from the prior program into Bartlett's salaries and wage structure, with the biggest piece being how we pay benefits. So being a part of the CBJ, we have a PERS benefit that is doesn't really make us be competitive with salaries and wages with other entities because it is kind of a 22% premium on what everyone pays for salaries and wages. With that, again, here's your detail slide. With a recommendation on both these programs, being the board understands the importance of the program to the community and will work to ensure that services are retained in the community. Management will pursue a transfer of operations to a third-party provider. If this is not successful, the board and management will pursue permanent subsidization. Moving on to the crisis center. This is one of the newer programs that started seeing patients December 18th of 2023. What you have up here, you'll see I go from the budget number to an estimate. So this number was originally budgeted based on the formula that we found after running the program for a few months was not really accurate and overstated volumes based on the population that had assumed. So with revenues of $960,000 estimated and the direct expenses of $3.1 million, it has an operating loss of $2.2 million. And when you add in overhead allocations and facilities, we have an estimated allocated operating loss of $3.75 million. This program was set up for adolescents. When it was originally envisioned, it was set up was looked at for adults and adolescents. After construction of the building, it was determined that the only viable options were adolescents or one service. As we stated before, volumes have been below the performer. Seeing less than a patient a day on the residential side. This is a new building, and there's some questions about funding on that. And so we reviewed all the grants and dollars that were used to construct that building to see if there was any covenants or restrictions that we'd have to be aware of. And the only one that was found in all the funding we had was based on the bonds we secured, which were tax exempt. So the building has to be used for department services. Moving on to the detail slide and the recommendation. The proposed recommendation is program closure and space utilization plan development for Aurora building. This program could be retained if the CBGA simply chose to provide a permanent subsidy. This is a difficult financial recommendation and in no way a reflection of the individuals who provide and receive these services. The last one we're going to touch base on is the ABA, which is the Applied Behavioral Analysis Program. This is a program that was set up for adolescents that were on the spectrum. It was actually came over to Department in June of 2021. With the start of the review of these programs and the uncertainty around the future of these programs, the two providers in this program actually provided a resignation with the goal of them both opening their own applied behavioral analysis program in Juneau. And so we've been working with them and encouraged them on that road. So with that, the recommendation would be to support the departing staff in the startup of the new ABA program in private foundation. So when we look at next steps, we touched base on this in the first one, the two meetings we have at the end of the month, finance meeting and the board meeting. I just want to point out that I want people to know where you can submit their public comment. It's up there on this last slide. And we will be taking that to end of business day, June 19th.
Thank you, Joe. Everyone here? Thank you, Joe, for that detailed comment. I think I want to move that table like we had it last time, if we can do that.
So we're just gonna meet people where they're at with a mic.
I was going to have them come to the table, at least during the question and answer period. They can sit there and look at us. Where you want to move it? We're going to move it like off to the side so everybody can see them.
Like Karen Lott.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much. So Joe, thank you very much for a very detailed presentation. I know there's a lot of information just kind of thrown at you and they've been out there for a while, but I still know that I wanted to make sure that we had lots of opportunity for the public to ask us questions, just direct questions, not just email, talk to us directly. So if anybody online wants to ask a question, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. I don't see anybody right now with their hand up, so I think we'll start with questions from the room. Now remember, this is question and answers only. If you have comments, we're going to do that in the second part. So first person, raise your hand and come on up to the table. The lady in pink, right there, lady in pink, right here.
Thank you.
Please come up to the
I
table.
think they settled this too.
That's for the comment.
I apologize if I missed your prior.
Please say your name and where you're from, part of town, and then we'll go from there.
My name is Samara Green and I live just down the road here with my lovely wife Leanne, who worked at the hospital for 41 years.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Hey, go ahead.
my question is, and I apologize if somehow I missed this information earlier. You said you were looking to pursue Bartlett being classified as a critical access hospital, and that would result in no decrease in current services. But my question is, how would that be helpful to Bartlett, especially with regards to budgetary issues?
It's a good question, thank you. So I have to go backwards and tell you a little bit how we're paid with Medicare right now, and then I'll tell you what critical access gets paid for. So right now we are on the demonstration program, which is what Medicare pays us. So they pay us like a normal hospital for our outpatient services, like every other PBS hospital. And then for our inpatient unit, they pay us based on costs. There is some nuances to how they pay us, but basically they look at the cost of those programs and then they settle up with that on an annual basis, which is well above what we would get paid if we were just on the DRG. So if they paid like the normal hospital, we get paid less than we are on this demonstration. The same holds true if we're able to get cost-based reimbursement on the outpatient side. And so we'd be paid costs, which would be substantially more than we're paid now for outpatient services. There are a lot of hoops. We've gone through a long legal review to see whether this is possible. We reviewed all the programs in place and to make sure it's even possible. So we are trying to pull together what a plan would look like moving forward and present that to the board in the coming months.
So in the short answer is it would increase revenue from Medicare
It would increase Medicare
reimbursement. Okay. Good deal.
Thank you very much. So I have an online question that's in the chat, and then sir, you can come up and we'll take your question next after this. So didn't Bartlett receive Alaska Mental Health Trust and other funds to build the Crisis Now building? Do we have an obligation?
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID, followed by pound.
And I'm going to turn that one over to Joe.
Yeah, this question came up in the first meeting, so we made sure we reviewed all this and had that appropriate numbers. The Aurora building was funded by 4 different grants and donations. So we did have a grant from the Mental Health Trust Fund of $200,000 during the year. So we reviewed all these grants that we received, any restriction associated with them, and made sure we would not be out of compliance with those grants.
Thank you very much. And I know that Joe and I have talked about this before, because like Joe said, this did come up last time. And I wanted to know exactly how much funds we got from them versus are we going to be in compliance with this building for sure. So sir, can you state your name, what part of town you're from? And remember, this is just a question and answer period.
And I'm sorry, we got a message online that the sound quality, if we could just speak up clearly.
Okay, thank you. And just speak right into the mic, sir.
Testing. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm Mike Clemens in the Valley. The elephant in the room is that Search is directly competing. So here's my question. What did the board know? When did you find out about it? And how did you find out about it? That Search was directly impacting your bottom line? And I realize that's not a simple answer, but that's my question.
Well, I've been on the board for 6 years and probably Dr. Urata back there, I hate to point you out like that, he's been on the board for forever. And, you know, this has been, and Dr. Jones here too, and Deb and Max has been with Bartlett for years doing the audit and stuff. So you're right, this is not something that snuck up on us. This is something that we knew about.
That's not an answer. So when did you know?
Do you want me to give you a time and a date and a day?
Yes, I
Okay,
would.
so I'm gonna tell you that it's been years, and it's been years coming.
Okay, so then I have a follow-up question, if that's
Absolutely.
okay?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not new to this community, and I'll be brief. First child was born at St. Anne. Second child was born at Bartlett.
Is this a question or is this a comment?
Okay, just so I've been around, I try to pay attention. People who follow city government know that I try, so when you bought the family practice building, you knew that Search was eating into your bottom line. Is that correct?
Well, we knew that Search was being very competitive. We knew that we had a competitor in the market. Yes, sir.
Okay, so if they're driving private practitioners out of the market, how are you going to put tenants in the building when the current crop of baby boomer healthcare practitioners retire if you can't get anybody to fit into the building?
Well, I believe that when we purchased the family practice building, it was all part of our strategic plan to be able to make sure that Bartlett was out in the community all over the place. But you have to remember that when we bought the family practice building, we did not displace any physicians there. We have all of the physicians and all of the tenants that were in there, and we were able to ensure that those tenants are able to stay there, which is, Dr. Raster.
I know.
Okay, so I'm not really understanding the question.
Here's the question. Bartlett is in a crisis. It's not just COVID. Hospitals down south have got a lot of problems. Bartlett's not unique in that regard. But with regard to search and what's happening to your bottom line, that's a problem. So it's okay if Bartlett's making money and wants to reward some doctors by buying their building. But if you're asking to raise taxes to cover up Bartlett's operating deficit, then that becomes my concern. And so that's why I want to know, what did you know? When did you know it? And how did you find out? Because there's a lot of things here.
Okay.
And I realize you can't answer that right now.
So thank you very much. I do want you to know that we believe that a community hospital for Juneau is extremely important, okay? And I believe that the reason why we're having these meetings right now is to find out what the public, Juneau public, wants from their community hospital. Sir, if you don't want your taxes raised and you don't want to have services at Bartlett, this is your opportunity to tell us that.
Well, the question time is right now. And so I'm asking, what did you know? When did you know it? And how did you find out? Because I haven't seen that in any of these documents. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir.
And I realize you don't want to answer the question.
I thought I'd already answered the question. We've known this for years that Search was going to be a competitor in the market.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
And I'm old. I'm older than I look, okay? And so when I came in, there was a sign-up sheet for public comment, not for question and answer. So I confuse easily. So I'm sorry if I confused you.
Thank you, sir. Next question. There's no questions in the room? Oh, come on up.
This is not very loud. I'm Erin Walker Tolis, and I live in the Valley. And I guess one of my questions is, I see some information in your packet about the number of individuals served by each of these programs. Have you I'm sure you've considered, but could you talk a little bit about how you considered growing current and future community need in terms of making this decision process?
Thanks, Max.
Thanks, Erin. It's good to see you. There's a different answer for each one of these, obviously, and I'll deal with hospice and home care that CCS used to operate. Our understanding so far is that CCS at one point had a pretty good public outreach program. A lot of, in the transition between CCS and Bartlett, a lot of the, the public infrastructure, if you will, around hospice and home care kind of wilted a little bit. So what we're trying to do is we rewater that, bring it back some. And that's a big part of that. Hospice and home care services are most effective, especially hospice, when patients enter hospice, as long as possible before they pass, and have that opportunity. And to raise that awareness requires pretty significant public outreach. And that hasn't started yet. It's on the radar to do that, but it hasn't started yet. There's a corollary with home care and identifying really what are the home care services that, the community most needs, everything from, wound care to, traditional home care services. And then, go out and provide those. There's a little bit more marketing around that. There's different things and I touched on that when I was giving my earlier comments, but we still have all that work to do. So there's still plans that need to be developed, whether, it's hospice and home care or, whatever services, if we want to go after oncology or any of these services, we've got to have a strong financial plan. There's been a little bit of disruption around Bartlett, not only COVID, but also management turnover. I mean, geez, we haven't had a solid CEO here for a long period of time. Chuck Bill was here for a few years, but really it's been since Valiant. And certainly since Mr. Bill, there's been a lot of disruption. And so there's a lot of getting our feet back on the ground that we're we're working to try to do. So that answered that question.
Yes, thank you for that. And I'll actually ask also about BOPS and the adolescent program as well, because mental health services, with Juno Youth Services closing not too long ago, I know JAM's doing a good job expanding as much as they can, but still there's a big gap in behavioral health, especially for children. And I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Thank you for the question. We are currently looking at all options. So, we talked about BOPS, which you saw on the slide that we showed, it was with the hospital. So we're considering that what we call a core service. And the rest of the mental health and behavioral health system we're looking at, we are currently in conversations with others throughout the state that as a result of this information being shared are interested in trying to see if they can do something to help support those programs. I'm not at liberty to say who they are because we're still just talking and having those early on conversations. But as I said earlier, we're kind of shaking every tree and seeing what will fall out and just seeing what avenues we can go to help either take those services or help support those services for our community.
Thanks so much. And third question that I swear I'll get down. So you mentioned, Max, you mentioned the CEO search, and I know it is really challenging, especially when an agency or organization's in a crisis and you don't have consistent long-term leadership to try to take the plan, implement the plan, and stay on task and address issues as they arise through the process. Where is the hospital at with that right now? In search of a CEO, and what's up?
Thank you, Erin. Actually, Deb Johnston is leading our CEO search, so we have a bunch of candidates. I think I saw 47, 50 candidates right now, and we're going through them with our human resources, and then she's got a team together, so we're working through that. Also, Ian Warden, who's probably as Max touched on earlier, just extremely experienced. He's offered to stay on for at least till the end of the year, or if we need him, I'm sure we can talk him into staying in a little bit longer. So we are in good shape as far as leadership goes today, and I believe that we're on a really good path to make sure that we make proper choices going forward.
I would just add that the committee is planning to meet on the 13th. Human Resources has gone through all the applicants to make sure that they meet the minimum requirements that we set forward. So we're going to be starting to reach out to folks within the next week or so.
Thanks so much. And just in terms of how do I don't want to take up the time at this meeting, but are you sharing sort of what you're looking for or sort of the key characteristics you're looking for in your search? I know there's minimum qualifications, but in terms of prioritization, you're never going to find the right perfect person who's good at everything, but it would be great for me to know, like, what are you really looking for? Who are you looking for in terms of qualities? And not to put you on the spot, but I'd love to find that out later.
I'll be happy to make sure somebody gets that information to you.
We want them to buy a house.
100% favor of that. Not to address the affordable housing issue in this town too. So great.
Thank you, Erin. I don't see any questions online. Anybody else in the room want to come up and ask the question? Nope. All right, so it's 10 after 6. We'll take a quick 10-minute break, and we'll come back at about 20 after 6, and we'll start the comment period. Now to the public comment process. We're going to start with those who've signed up in person in the room, and then I'll move back to the online participants before coming back to the room to make sure that we didn't miss anybody in. That's to still give a comment. Once seated, again, please state your name for the record and what part of town you're from. And you have 3 minutes. Everybody will just have 3 minutes tonight. A board member may engage with you and ask you a question or clarify your statement to make sure that we completely understand it. So with that being said, we're going to look for Shannon Mason. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shannon Mason. I'm from the Valley. I'm reading on behalf of my partner Dylan Stewart, who is also from the Valley. The following statement is his alone and does not represent his employers or departments. My name is Dylan Stewart, and I'm a graduate of Juneau Douglas High School class of 2008 and a graduate of UAA's Juneau Registered Nurse cohort of 2017. I have worked in 3 different nursing specialties for 6 healthcare organizations across 3 states before finally returning and working back home in Juneau. I acknowledge that the board has hard decisions to make regarding the financial solvency of our community hospital. However, the board needs to be reminded that ultimately both the hospital and the people living in Juneau will still bear the cost of whatever financial decisions are made. If there is a student living in our community with a mental health disorder, they will now have few or none clinical staff safety nets. In episodes of decompensation, they will end up in our hospital. A neighbor living in our community with a longstanding alcohol or drug addiction who wants to get clean may not have the outpatient services needed and will fall through the cracks and into our hospital. An elder living in our community with a medical diagnosis, leaving them 6 months left to live, will have a harder time dying peacefully at home comfortably with their family and will instead have their last restless moments in our hospital. A post-surgical patient being cared for in our hospital will now have the potential for a longer length of stay or to be brought back in worse shape soon after their discharge, as there is no home health care option. And all of these patients are some of the most vulnerable in our community and will have even less resources available to keep them from readmitting when they are discharged. Any of the proposed cuts will put more work on the already hardworking acute care staff and social workers at Bartlett Regional Hospital. I am asking the board to consider these cuts and the downstream effects they will have. If some of these cuts are deemed necessary, then please hire additional nurses, CNAs, social workers, auxiliary staff, hire more one-on-one sitters, provide more training, and ask the city to assist in providing these life-saving services to its citizens before they become patients. Thank you for your time. Dylan Stewart, RN, CEN, CFRN. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon, and thank you for Dylan for coming back to our community. Coming back.
Happy to do it.
Anybody in the board have any comments?
I think as a community, part of the discussion is the downstream effects. Are we cost shifting? So when we make some decisions about our mental health services, when we make decisions about our addiction services, we have, as a community, I mean, again, it's the hospital we have to worry about, we have to pay our bills. But as a community, there's the same money. That money we may save as a hospital could mean more money for the community. And I really think those are important discussions, particularly when we integrate with the city. And that's one good thing, is that we are a city-owned hospital and we can have the discussions, and that's so important. I mean, like, I think about COVID. If you lived in Juneau, your chances of dying of COVID was 30% less than any other place in the state. You know why that was? Because the city and the hospital worked together and the community worked together. So when we look at these things, I just really think we need to really engage if we save money in the hospital, but the police department spending twice as much, it's not smart for our community. So thank you, Dylan.
Thank you, Dr. Jones, for putting thought and time into all of this, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Next, we have Richard.
Good evening. My name is Richard Fagner. I am president of NAMI Alaska and am here as a representative of my board. And also I'm coming to you as a Juneau resident for 48 years in the Valley. I want to highlight the indispensable role of Juneau's Crisis Stabilization Center that it can play in our community and ask that you keep it open. It is obvious that its primary purpose is to serve individuals, but the benefits of this center extend far beyond the individual directly served. By providing immediate care, we alleviate the burden of our emergency rooms and law enforcement agencies. When individuals in crisis are diverted to a center emergency medical staff can focus on patients with physical health needs, reducing wait times in emergency rooms, and improving care. Our law enforcement officers are not mental health professionals. When they are forced to manage psychiatric crises that can lead to unnecessary incarcerations, further traumatizations of individuals, and straining our criminal justice system. This center provides an alternative, ensuring that those in crisis receive the mental health support they need, not jail time. Over the past year, the NAMI Alaska Board saw crisis stabilization centers growing throughout our state. And we were very excited when Bartlett began to support the construction of the unit here. From a financial perspective, retaining our crisis stabilization center is a prudent investment. Reducing hospital admissions and lengths of stay ultimately saves communities substantial amounts of money. Millions of dollars have been saved annually in Phoenix, Los Angeles, Seattle, Houston, and many others in our country. Reduced reliance on more expensive emergency services has decreased recidivism and saves money. Most importantly, however, human stories truly underscore the center's value. Imagine a mother with severe postpartum depression finding solace in immediate care, or a teenager in the throes of suicidal thoughts receiving timely intervention, or a veteran grappling with PTSD being met with understanding and expertise. These are not hypothetical scenarios. They are real stories from our community. Finally, retaining a crisis stabilization center is not just a matter of budget allocations and resource management. It is a commitment to the well-being of our community, to the dignity of those in crisis, and to the principle that everyone deserves immediate, compassionate care in their darkest moments. NAMI Alaska and I urge you to consider the profound impact of the center and to ensure its continued operation for the sake of all those that it can serve. And thank you for listening to this testimony, and I appreciate your work on your board.
Thank you very much, Richard. Okay. Debbie.
My name is Debbie Bagnett, and I moved to the Valley with my husband 40-some years ago. Yeah. Anyway, I'm a retired teacher, a mother of 3, a grandmother of 5, and I volunteered for NAMI Juneau for the last 15 years. My work at NAMI Juneau is supporting families or friends who have a loved one who is experiencing the unique challenge of living with mental illness. So a deep understanding of the trauma that people face when their world is turned upside down and symptoms are escalating and they need support and they need it right now. That's what motivates me to speak tonight. In the past 20 years, we've been excited to see the growth of mental health parity in our healthcare system. This principle ensures that individuals living with mental health or substance abuse disorders have access to the same level of care and treatment as individuals with physical health conditions. That's the mandate. So ask yourselves, do the current recommendations reflect mental health parity? Do they need revision to ensure that individuals living with mental health or substance abuse disorders have access to that same level of care and treatment as individuals with physical health conditions? I am here to urge you tonight to amend your recommendation for crisis services and rainforest recovery from close it to ensure this service exists in the community in some capacity. These are not second-class health groups. These are core services It is your responsibility as the board of our regional hospital to acknowledge the importance of these programs, these services that they provide to our community, and to fight for them. Thank you for your work on this board. It must keep you up at night. I appreciate your efforts.
Thank you very much for your comments. Thank you. Okay. Everybody hear me on this one? Next, we have Paula. Thank you, Paula. Just state your name and what part of town you're from. And you have 3 minutes.
My name is, can you hear me? My name is Paula Rohrabacher. I live in Douglas and I've been a resident of Juneau for 46 years. Good evening. I'm here to speak in support of the Crisis Stabilization Center for our community. I want to tell you the story of a family whom I know well in this community and their son who needed crisis stabilization services when none were available. I'm going to refer to him as James, even though this is not his actual name. James graduated from college and was awaiting the start of a new job. Hurricane Katrina happened and he volunteered with the Red Cross to work in a relocation site for evacuees. While on his mission, he had a serious psychotic break. A psychiatrist contacted his parents here in Juneau and advised them to both come down to accompany him home. Arriving home, the parents immediately scheduled an appointment with a psychiatrist. After the initial intake, they were informed that the next available appointment was a month away, but that if his condition deteriorated, they should bring him to the ER. It was soon that their fears were realized. James screamed at the top of his lungs to expunge evil spirits from his body. He did this until he completely lost his voice. Soon thereafter, he decided to go camping and hiked up Thunder Mountain on a rainy September morning. The next day, his parents got a call from a local church. They had their son and they were protecting him. He'd gone into the church naked and lay prostrate on the floor. This is just one small glimpse of his complicated journey. Now I ask you, if this young man had received immediate services at a crisis stabilization center, would this trauma have been so intense? He was willing to see a doctor, but the hallucinations and delusions had to set in. His condition had to deteriorate before mental health unit services could be offered. He was eventually there for a month. They insisted he fill out disability paperwork, telling him he would never be able to work again. You have important decisions to make in the weeks ahead. Please remember James's story. His story is real and he is not alone. Thank you for your time and your efforts.
Thank you very much, Paula, for sharing your story with us. Okay, Mr. Murray Walsh.
My name is Murray Walsh. I live in West Juneau. And my wife Sarah and I have been here for a long time. And our luck has been pretty good medically until last fall. She got real bad sick, spent 3 weeks here at Bartlett, had to be medevaced to Anchorage, where she spent another 4 months in the hospitals there. Most of those were in St. Elias. I was there most of the time with her. I learned a lot about the medical business during that time. She would still be at St. Elias if she could not be discharged to Bartlett Home Health Care, where she was, there's a word they use for starting up the service, intake or something like that. That was at the end of January. And she was discharged from home care about a month ago. So it worked. She needed all kinds of support at the beginning, but it was all things that could be done at home. The other option, I guess, would have been Wildflower Court, which I think probably costs about $1,000 a day. All the services were skilled nursing or less, but she only needed nursing service 30 times every 3 days or 4 days. So from an efficiency standpoint, home care was what she needed or made the most sense. And it makes the most sense from the provider side too. No building to pay for, just some supplies and a little bit of gas money. So I'm glad to hear you want to try and keep it going. But what I'm here to say is it meant a lot to me and to her that was there. And I'm willing to do whatever I can to help you guys keep it. So whatever else you do, try to come up with something that allows people like me to participate. 3 minutes is not really enough time to tell her story, but or to exchange ideas. I'm willing to help, and I can get other people to join me to help. It is absolutely a better way to deal with situations like my wife. I mean, she went from practically dead to almost back to her original illness, pre-illness self. So miracles have happened in our life, and I want to help keep it going. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Thank you for sharing your story. Please know that you can also go onto our website, and we can help you with that. Write emails to us. I guarantee you that this board has reads every single email from anybody that's written ideas or anything. So please feel free to reach out to us, email us, let us know, come to our next board meeting, and give us your input.
I'll do all of that, but I'm also trying to subtly suggest that we create a committee that people like me can be a member of.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh.
And one of the members of this board has seen me naked.
Rosemary Green. Rosemary? Thank you, Rosemary. Just have a seat and tell us your name and what part of town you're from. And
Sarah. My name is Rosemary Greening, and I live in West Juneau. And I have had my turn. I'm speaking for the home health and hospice support. I've had my turn in the leadership capacity and worked with a few of the people in this room. And the relationship, years ago, we tried to encourage Bartlett to be the home for the home health and hospice. They would rather subsidize with money, and but it's a very complementary relationship. They work well together, the whole package. And I am in support of Bartlett carrying this on because you offer more stability to the program as a whole through many of the services that you also have and the capacities that you also have. And it's a beautiful blend. You also are interested in seeing if there's a provider who might want to take this over rather than yourselves. The beginning of home health and hospice was about 45 years ago. As a hospice standalone, home health was added. In that entire time, it's been a struggle, and no other provider has shown their face. So please embrace this service. Thank you.
thank you very much, Rosemary. Thanks.
Hey, Rosemary, I've got just a question before you leave. You worked for CCS in hospice and home care for a while, is that right?
5 years,
And when was it?
2009 to 2013.
We talked a little bit earlier about kind of the fabric of hospice and home care and how it's so important to establish a, volunteer base and during the time that you guys were there, the outreach that you did in the community to encourage, the doctors and medical community to, refer into hospice early and that kind of thing. Just like your thoughts about how you did that, your success with that kind of thing.
Well, I've been doing a little reach out recently because of another request that came my way. In particular to the larger facilities in town, such as Pioneer Hall and Riverview. And then we talked about Wildflower Court and, the other places where older people live. And in talking with many folks, there still is a lack of appreciation for the services that home health and hospice provide. And I think, at the risk of alienating anybody, I think this also includes physicians. And it's not that they're ignorant about it, they just don't think about it. And a referral to this agency can come from anywhere in the community, anybody. But the main place is discharge planning, case management. And that's a really good place to begin the education and continue it and keep it up. And I would say there was nothing specifically that we did, except it's an ongoing, continuing process to really be alert to who can be your customer.
If I could just follow up. So part of the reason I'm asking that is that there's a longevity piece to hospice and home care that's, been missing. And what we're looking at is, what does a plan look like for stability for hospice and home care? And I just, in your experience and your, professional background, is this a 3-year commitment that we need to make? Is it 5-year commitment to really be able to, get the word out, especially in the nurses? I mean, you hear so often how nurses are the way that families find out about hospice and home care services. I just like your thoughts about that.
As I said, it's ongoing. It's not a 3-year or a 5-year. You're really working on it all the time. And the as to the stability, that is critical. And the stability can come from being part of a hospice or a hospital program. And you don't consider a home health and hospice, I guess you're considering it a non-core service. I think it's a real hybrid between a core service that supports the hospital by helping you do better discharge, quicker discharges. It's also a core community service that's really needed. And I think Murray Walsh spoke well to that, as did others in the room. And don't give up on it. I think Lexi Holtzman said that the last time you had the meeting. You're very early in this process. It's not going to be a big money maker. Once you get everything flowing and the reimbursements coming in, you can break even. So it's not a drag. And it provides so much else. It is also possible to make money. It won't be very much, but the stability is probably in the staffing is very critical for a program like that. And Juneau is a very small community, and it doesn't have many ancillary support systems. So each of these services needs to be able to stand on their own. with supporting each other. So I think Bartlett is a good place to house these dual programs. When a nurse comes to town, goes to the hospital, she doesn't go to any other needy place in town. She goes to the hospital first, he or she.
Thank you very much, Rosemary, for answering my questions. Thank you for your time too.
Thanks.
Don, Havertz. Mr. Havertz, have a seat and tell us your name and what part of town you're from.
Always a pleasure. For the record, I'm Don Haviger and live out in the valley. The hat I have on this evening, though, is as the Juneau Reentry Coalition Coordinator, and I'll be reading our letter to you for the record. Reentry in this case is from incarceration to community, and we are attempting to make sure all of those that come that way are successful. So, dear board, the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority reports in a 2020 position paper that 65% of Alaska inmates population has a diagnosable mental health disorder. The Alaska Department of Corrections in their 2023 offender profile documents a historically low statewide recidivism rate of 54.3%. Reductions in Alaska's recidivism rate become achievable because of efforts to connect those released from prison with reentry case managers who assist individuals in addressing criminogenic needs through an effective reentry plan. An effective reentry plan must include behavioral health and substance use disorder treatment for individuals needing those services. Bartlett Regional Hospital's behavioral health and substance use disorder treatment services are critical to Juneau's successful reentry outcomes. The Juneau Reentry Coalition supports the continuation of Bartlett outpatient psychiatric BOPS services, BOPS, Crisis Now, and Rainforest Recovery Center services for reentrants. These services are critical to interrupting the justice involvement cycle many find themselves in. The Juneau Reentry Coalition acknowledge that the Assembly and BRH Board have very difficult decisions to make regarding the future of these programs. Those solutions may involve a broad range of options when determining the best community solution. From JREX or the Juneau Reentry Coalition's perspective, the best solution to this difficult decision will be to maintain these services for justice-involved individuals working on successful reentry. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Dr. Urata. For the record, state your name and where you're from.
My name is Bob Urata. I'm from Juneau by way of Wrangell, Alaska. And I'm here to speak on behalf of Hospice and Home Care Juneau. I've been involved since, I think, 1988. Is that right? And I saw it at the beginning with Dr. Charlie Lehman was the first medical director. Andy Carpenetti was the first president. So this program has been here for a long, long time. And it would be kind of a shame that we have to stop it. Because hospice and home care are together, we save money on the nurses because they are able to do both jobs. For the patients, hospice provides palliative care or comfort care at the end of life, especially when they have no further curative treatment available.
they actually, there are studies that actually show that hospice care, they actually live a little bit longer because there's less suffering. In addition to that, it provides emotional, spiritual, and grief care to the patient and the family. It provides respite care for families, and it relieves pain and suffering. It also provides hope and dignity at the end of life. It's so important. Home care has provided help to the hospital in having patients having shorter lengths of stay. Also, patients seem to regain independence and heal a little bit faster in the home setting. It is also cost effective, and it provides monitoring of older patients or sick patients at home, and it also provides education for the family. It is my opinion that these will benefit Bartlett in many ways and at a cost that will repay itself many more than dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Ronick. Allison? Hey, Allison, just state your name and where you're part of town.
Hi, my name is Allison Curry. I reside on North Douglas. I am testifying as a community member, but I am also a social worker on our mental health unit. And I coordinate safe discharge plans for those patients. I am testifying today because I'm very concerned about the possibility of Rainforest closing its doors and the impact it will have on our local community and broader communities statewide. I will be writing the assembly to advocate for permanent subsidization if a third-party organization is not found to keep its doors open. Rainforest provides life-saving treatment and is often part of MHU patients' discharge plans. I assist multiple patients on a frequent basis with applications for residential treatment programs across the state, including Rainforest. And most often, Rainforest is the first available to accept patients because they are a 28-day program, which means a shorter turnaround if they do have a wait list, and that makes direct transfers possible. Rainforest is a critical first step for many people in recovery or on their recovery journey, and patients often transition to a lower level of care like GHS and Juno or Sitka counseling for continued treatment in a supportive, sober living environment. Keeping Rainforest doors open means people get care faster. Other programs across the state like Set Free Alaska, Aquila House, Seaview, and Ralph Purdue, just to name a few, have consistent wait lists of 2 to 6 months minimum due to the length of their programs and high demand for treatment statewide. If Rainforest closes, for the patients who are motivated for treatment now, there will be an increase, a sharp increase of high-risk discharges to unsafe living environments with no sober social supports and limited resources to support follow-up and follow through with getting into a treatment program elsewhere when their wait time is multiple months long. And also in recent experience, patients have died while waiting for treatment. People living with mental illness and substance use disorder deserve access to timely, quality care just like anybody else. Their lives matter too. And proposing closing Rainforest doors sends the message that they don't and further stigmatizes mental health and substance use disorder. I feel the same about the recommendation to close crisis services and echo much of what has been said in NAMI's testimony tonight and also last week by Aaron Surma. I would ask that you continue working to ensure that this service exists in some capacity in addition to Rainforest. And thank you for taking public comment.
Thank you very much. Dr. Jones.
How common is it that you, part of the discharge plans from someone on the mental health unit is to go to Rainforest?
I mean, pretty frequently, I don't have numbers because I don't collect that data, but I would say almost on a weekly basis, there's somebody with a co-occurring disorder. Sorry. almost on a weekly basis, there's somebody on our unit with a co-occurring disorder who's interested in treatment and will assist with those applications. I wouldn't say that frequently that they directly transfer to Rainforest, but it does happen often enough. And I mean, there was even a patient today that just went over.
And because of that cohort, we have the ASAM 3.5, right? Does that, because of their coming from them, does that make them more necessary for them to be a 3.5 versus something else from coming from
I think to qualify for the 3.5, I mean, there's multiple levels of criteria. So mental health is a factor. It is one of the access points that does impact that score. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, Aaron. Welcome back.
Why, thank you. I'm Erin Walker Tolis and I live in the Valley and I've been in town 30 years. I really appreciate all the other public commenting on the value of so many of these programs, and I agree wholeheartedly. So I'm not going to re-echo what's already been stated. I'd like to just ask you to consider the following through your decision-making process, which I know is incredibly complex and difficult. I would ask you to, I know that when we're doing these budget financial exercises and trying to consider all this, it's easy to get caught up in the numbers alone and simply look at the financials and say, well, now I made the numbers balance, now we'll be fine. But I urge you to always consider the community need, both the current community need in these programs, but also the projected community needs. Some of these programs like hospice and home health are new to Bartlett. The crisis help is new to Bartlett. And so projecting community need forward, because what you're dealing with today might not be what the community need is tomorrow. Balancing that community need with your budget and your fiscal sustainability, but also considering the engagement and the thoughts of your current staff at Bartlett and community partners. You've got a lot of wisdom in Bartlett already, people who've done this for many, many years. And I hope that you're engaging staff in the process, talking to them about what their thoughts are about some of these items as well. I'd like to encourage you to consider in your CEO search, in addition to the qualities you need, the capacity to manage the hospital, their experience, their expertise, is also to prioritize collaboration as one of their qualities. I think one of the things that distinguishes Juneau and Southeast Alaska in general as a successful system, despite our limitations and being so small, is that we work together in general. We work together very, very well. And we do a lot with much less. And when I talk to partners and colleagues down south, they're always shocked at how well we work together. I'd like to encourage you to hire a CEO who's going to dive into that and make the most of the resources that are already here and leverage what's already in existence in terms of partners and resources. And also to look at someone with a lot of integrity, someone who's going to be committed to Juneau and our community and the region, since we serve the region. And think about, this is somebody who's really inspired to be here, because that will allow them to stay and weather all of this and not ditch and run when it gets difficult, or see this as a couple of year commitment before they move on to their next placement. I would not like another itinerant CEO. Not that there aren't great short-term people that have helped us stay afloat during difficult times. I really am grateful for them. But in terms of a long-term permanent CEO, somebody who's really going to be committed to Juneau, listening to the community and have investment in who we are and maintaining this in a long haul, because I think that's the person who's going to stick with us long enough, because these things take a lot of time to fix, long enough to see it through, because without consistent long-term dedicated leadership, it's hard for me to imagine any plan that you come up with being truly successful long-term and being sustainable. Thanks.
Thank you, Erin. We're going to turn online to Darren Kelly. Darren, unmute yourself and tell us your name and, of course, where you're from, part of town.
Yeah, thank you. Tried to turn on the video, didn't seem to work. I live here in the Flats, and I've been here in Juneau about 10 years, and work for the federal government. I'm a professional, and I'm here to talk specifically about Crisis Now and Rainforest Recovery. I'm a user of services. I know Allison from actually, frankly, being in the mental health unit myself. You wouldn't know it. I'm successful. I look like a regular person, and I am. It just happened to have a mental health crisis, mental health issues all my life. And wasn't diagnosed till only 8 years ago by Bartlett providers. So there's a lot of us walking around the community who you may not think are using some of these services, but we are. And Crisis Now specifically was a really important option that I was looking forward to. Getting into the MHU, often you end up getting stuck in the ER, in the ICU for a while you have 24/7 care. And so it was a really important tool, and personally, my own arsenal in making me more likely when I'm having a mental health crisis to actually check into the hospital. Without Crisis Now, I'm frankly less likely to actually go and get the care that I need. And that's just the way mental health works. I think it's important to remember in terms of the Crisis Now Center that 30% of Juneau's youth right now are contemplating suicide. That study is done by NAMI and Juneau Suicide Prevention Coalition. And so it's obvious 30% of our youth, the need is there for Crisis Now. I mean, the need is definitely there. I understand very difficult decisions in terms of budget. But right now, these youth in crisis have to go to the ER, and as I mentioned, go to ICU. They can't go in the mental health unit, of course, because they're not adults. And so they're really not getting the services that they need. And then, of course, to get additional services, additional level of care, they have to fly to Anchorage or down to Seattle. For example, Anchorage staying in Providence, which is far from family and friend supports, which therapeutically is just not a good idea. Again, Crisis Now kind of fixed this. And, this kind of quick therapeutic care, it literally saves lives. So I think we remember that. We're talking about lives on the line here. And Rainforest Recovery, treats addiction as a disease and not like the symptoms that would be treated in the ER. ER may be actually financially more rewarding for the hospital than Rainforest Recovery, but of course, therapeutically, it's not efficient. It's a really bad idea, as Allison alluded to. And I think it's important that we realize that, making these programs go away doesn't make the patients go away. So we'll be here in the community. We just won't be getting the services that we really need. And it's also worth noting that Bartlett's, just a quick look at those financials, Bartlett's other programs were losing over $5 million. So the point is, it's not just these programs that are having some inefficiencies. It's a more structural thing. And I don't know the answer. That's what you guys are looking at. And I know it's a lot of work. So thank you for that. And I just want to kind of conclude that I want us to picture for a second that what if we learned that 30% of Juneau's youth had a potentially deadly cancer? And this cancer could kill them because, either quickly or slowly. I would suggest that we wouldn't say that these are not in our core services or it's not cost effective. Mental illness and addiction are both medical conditions that deserve funding. And if we're going to be a community hospital, then we actually have to deal with the fact that these are huge, huge medical problems in our community. And, in terms of moving forward, that's pretty much it. But thank you for your time. And I know it's a very tough decision. I just wanted to sort of share a little perspective on the impacts that it has on those of us who use these services. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Darren. Next online, we have Cindy A. Cindy, say your name and what part of town you're from. You have 3 minutes. Oh, Cindy, you need to unmute yourself too, please.
Oh, I'm trying to start my video too, and I can't. So I'll just talk. I'm Cindy Audette, and I worked at the hospital for 30 years in the pharmacy. So over the years, I was involved in many incidents regarding behavioral health and hospice and substance abuse disorder that created quite a strain on the staff. And I think that the movement in the direction we've gone has alleviated some of that strain. And that I would fully expect that strain to come back if these programs aren't fully funded. So I plan to support my taxes going to these programs, even if they have to be subsidized. I assume presume there are third-party possibilities, but maybe not interested in coming here. I also want to mention that, just the history of treating mental health and substance use disorders goes back to probably the 50s and 60s, where, and there's a really good podcast called Lost Patients that talks about what was supposed to happen when the state mental closed and didn't happen. So it was to move the care into community health resources and integrate people instead of locking them away in hospitals because they didn't, whatever, for whatever. And so I would just support finding a creative solution to keeping services going, because if we lose them, we may never get them back, and we will feel the
AGCB, for your comments. We've gone through everybody that's on the sheet and everybody that's online. Is there anybody else in the room that has another comment? Please come, state your name, what part of town are you from? You have 3 minutes.
My name is Rebecca Mills and I live in West Juneau. Something sat with me pretty heavily after the meeting last week. And it was discussed in that meeting, the percentage of individuals at Rainforest who are surge beneficiaries for financial purposes. After, enjoying the celebration events this weekend, something that stuck out to me is that also means that those are Alaska Native or American Indian individuals. When a death occurs in a community like that, those are future elders. Those are people that carry that tradition along. Those are my partner's family. And that's very heavy. And substance use did not become a thing until Europeans settled here. It's an effect of colonization. I'm really grateful to hear that we read the land acknowledgement. That's a decolonization effort. And I would ask that we put our money where our mouth is and support what colonization has caused, which is substance use disorder. Between 2018 and 2022, opioid overdoses increased by 383% in the Alaska Native and American Indian population. And I don't think that burden should be placed solely on the consortium that serves those individuals, since that is a result of colonization.
Thank you, Rebecca. Is there anybody else in the room that has any more comments? Please. Come up and state your name and part of town, and you've got 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Christy Doyan. I live in the Valley. I am also the clinical supervisor at Rainforest Recovery Center, but I'm speaking today as a citizen, sharing my concerns. Last time I spoke in front of you guys, I was speaking more to the CBJ Assembly to help educate them a little bit about substance use treatment and the processes that people go through in order to get into treatment and go through the different levels. But today I wanted to speak as a voice for the people who are unable to speak here. As you know, many people are facing stigma for having substance use disorder diagnoses, for having mental health diagnoses. People feel really vulnerable if they share their family's stories. And unfortunately, people have also passed away from these diseases. So there are a lot of people who aren't able to be in this room and speak due to some of those reasons. As you know, addiction does not discriminate. It affects people from a wide range of backgrounds, different socioeconomic statuses, ages, race, ethnicity. And so many people feel pressure to hide their diseases. I applaud Darren for sharing his story. Addiction has greatly affected my family as well. That's one of the reasons I'm in this field, just to try to help save someone else's life. And when we're discussing these programs, you know, these people who take a month out of their lives to get help are so much more than a number. I know we talk about dollars, that's what it comes down to as a hospital who's trying to sustain themselves. But we listed 139 people on the packet today, as that's how many people have come through Rainforest so far this year. But I just hope that it can be considered that there's so much more than just that number. These are people with families, these are people with friends, with neighbors, with employers and coworkers. And it takes so much strength for people to recognize that they're struggling and that they need help. You know, people are able to look inwardly and ask for help, and that's extremely challenging to do. And for 1 month, people come to Rainforest and they learn life-changing skills. They're not just sitting there learning about this is what meth is, this is what alcohol is, this is what it does to your brain. People in treatment are learning skills to better be able to function as humans. They're learning skills to communicate. They're learning skills that help them deal with their triggers. They're learning coping skills. They're developing positive relationships. They're learning pro-social activities. Job center comes, they support our patients so that they can maybe get employment after they leave. They're learning all these skills to help them achieve long-term sobriety so they can integrate back into our communities. And that's really what I want us to focus on, just how critical substance use treatment is to the people and families in our community. And I just hope that Bartlett and CPJ can really work together and somehow plan for this permanent subsidization so we're still able to offer the service to people here locally.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Anybody else have any more comments? Please.
Deacon Charles Rohrbacher, in Douglas. I was a volunteer and then on staff chaplain for hospice and home care when it was a Catholic Community Services. And I want to echo and support all the supportive things that have been said about hospice and home care and continuing with Bartlett. But I just wanted to just kind of say two things. First is, part of my job as a chaplain was to tell people that we're all mortal and we're all going to die. And so that's a message I think that is worth hearing for the whole community. That is, in many ways, what Bartlett is being asked to do is to pay it forward. That is for ourselves, and not just ours as individuals, but for the whole community, because we're all going to be in a position at some point, if we're living here, if we live long enough, where either we're personally going to need hospice care or home care for ourselves or for our family members, for people that are our friends that we care about. And so keeping hospice viable and flourishing, actually, it seems to me, is just absolutely essential. The second thing is that hospice is fundamentally about relieving suffering, not just physical suffering and pain, but emotional suffering, psychological suffering, spiritual suffering, because as people are going through the process of their end of life, they're experiencing all of this. And this is why the whole model that's been developed is one of collaborative sort of teamwork between doctors, nurses, various kinds of therapists, social workers, and chaplains and people who are providing spiritual support. The other thing is, I think, to keep in mind in thinking about hospice in Bartlett is just the capacity that you have. I mean, there are things that you're able to do without a second thought at hospice and home care at Catholic Community Services. Our director was spending sleepless nights trying to patch together with Band-Aids and baling wire and St. Christopher medals. Social workers or traveling nurses or volunteers or CNAs or physical therapists. You have all of this sort of on tap and available that's built into how Bartlett is set up. And so I would urge you to think about that, about the capacity that you bring to the table as a community hospital to this very important work of hospice and home care in our community. Thank you very much. I know you're facing really difficult decisions, and God bless you.
Anybody else in the room have any comments? I don't see anybody else online, so we will end our comment section and we're going to.
Kenny, before we move on, are we allowed to call somebody back up that spoke earlier and ask a question, or is it too late?
Man, sure, board member, you can do whatever you like.
I'd like to ask Aaron a question.
Aaron, please tell us.
I think it was my first board meeting when you and can't remember who the board members were from CCS that came on the Zoom with our board, and if you wouldn't mind, because I think my memory is that CCS operated hospice and home care, and I'm not putting you on the spot. I think it's more of an educational thing, for us. But you operated it, around 20 years, 17 to 20 years, somewhere in that ballpark. And what caused the demise of hospice and home care at CCS? I mean, what were the top three, and what you guys worked to try to, as much as anything else, maybe it's a live and learn for us?
Certainly, and thank you for asking, by the way, because I'm happy to share. I think one of the biggest challenges, it was the nursing workforce issue, was really the number one issue. We had struggled for many years, had losses for many, many years. And I think Jennifer's here too. She's even more knowledgeable than me, so ask Jennifer too. But I think ultimately, what I found when I joined Catholic Community Service 9 years ago was we had some really big fundamental issues. I'm just going to put it out here because I want you to be successful. So here you go. One of the challenges we found when I got there, and again, we didn't have a consistent executive director for a number of years, so things kind of drop off, balls get dropped. So honestly, we looked at this and we found there were a lot of efficiencies we needed to implement. We were still having nurses come in and documentation. Long story short, we were able to redesign how we did documentation, do our notes, and our compliance, working with some contracted experts to find a way to make it almost break even. We were pretty much balancing for the most part a few years prior to COVID. So there's a lot of effort for efficiencies that got us closest to sustainable, but then COVID hit. And what we found, like you found, was that nurses were few and far between, and the cost of, there weren't as many local nurses. And as wages went up, we were even less able to compete for those nurses. And we went from about half traveling nurses, half local nurses, and it shifted more and more towards travelers. Cost of travelers got higher and higher. And that was just pretty much it. When our last local nurse had to move down south for other reasons, we ended up saying, well, we can't, no nurses means no revenue. And so as we had problems with staffing, of course, the program gets paid based on the services you provide. Fewer services because of less nurses means less revenue coming in, and it's kind of a nosedive from there. So it really was the workforce issue that really kind of tanked us. I know that the cost of nurses is still really high. And so in terms of infrastructure, I don't have any magic bullets. But it ultimately was the workforce issue, the cost of nurses and the availability of nurses to allow to consistently accept all referrals right away and get them services right away. I do want to say also, we did struggle with the outreach in terms, like Rosemary said, it is an ongoing challenge. It's a constant need to educate. It's a turnover in the workforce and people have 1,000 priorities, making sure that nurses, doctors' offices, any social workers, anybody involved in patient care is aware and sees the value of hospice. It's that outreach thing. The more outreach we do, the more you can maintain that level of service. So many people know the value of hospice in this room. They've spoken to it. But in general, I think our culture is uncomfortable with dying and death. And so it's not something that springs to mind and that a ton of people are enthusiastic about. So constant education is the other thing I'd really urge you to do.
Thank you, and Max Jim Toll. Thank you. Okay, so that ends our comment period and calling people back up period. We're going to move on to board comments, and who wants to lead that off with board comments? Hal.
Microphone.
Aaron will help you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Hal Geiger. It's been helpful, I think, for this board to hear people come and passionately talk about each of these programs. But I think from my conversation with people on the board, everybody on the board understands the importance of these programs. And there were several people who tried to really make it personal, put a face on this. For me, every one of these programs is personal to me. I'm going to live here for the rest of my life. I'm sure my wife and I are going to need hospice care. I've seen people, I've had friends die with excellent hospice care. I've had them die without hospice care in not such an excellent way. That's personal. The addiction and mental health, that's very personal to me too. I have a nephew that I was very close with when he was younger. In fact, he came up and stayed with my wife and I several times when he wasn't getting along with his parents. He became psychotic in his 20s. That led to addiction problems, and he eventually died with fentanyl in his system. It's very personal to me. However, this board cannot operate these programs without money. So people have come and explained to us how there's a personal face to this, but you really need to go talk to the assembly, talk to your legislators. You need to talk to somebody with money. And I know a theme that's come up in these conversations is if we invest in these programs, it's going to bring benefits. But I want you to understand that we at the hospital don't have the money to invest. We just don't have the money. And this is not a choice to us, like whether we put on a green shirt or a brown shirt, whether we cut this program or that. We don't have a choice. We don't have enough money to pay the nurses, to pay the staff to operate these programs. So I ask you to please take some of this passion to the people that do have that money and communicate to them why they need to invest in some permanent subsidies for these very important programs. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Hal. Dr. Raster.
Hi, I'm John Raster. I'm an ear doctor. I've been here almost 30 years, and I've read all of the emails, and I appreciate hearing the comments from many people that I know well in the room that have been here decades longer than me. And so the important thing, I think, is that we are trying hard to keep these programs going. We're not trying to telegraph that we're closing them. But it is, to Hal's point, it is much, the challenges are so substantial over the past few decades that I've been here in terms of declining reimbursement from insurance companies, declining benefits from the state government in terms of grant programs, declining subsidization from the city in some of these programs too. But despite all of that, we're trying hard to keep these going. So we're trying to find a way to keep them going. That's our focus. My focus. And I think I can speak for the board, it's our focus.
Thank you, Dr. Raster.
Oh, you got one over there.
Just hand it right
I thought
to you.
that was like attached to you, kid.
Just handing it to you.
I think John and Hal both were very eloquent, along with the rest of the folks that are here tonight about these programs. And mine is more to-do list focused, Joe. And I feel that when I look at stared at this calendar that we have in front of us, and the next stop we have is Finance Committee on the 24th. Hospice and home care, let's start with that. There's been talk about possibly splitting hospice and home care. And, as a possible option. And that, potentially there's a provider for home care out there, maybe not. But for the meeting on the 24th, even if it's kind of do the best you can, but I would like to see an estimate of what does that look like? When we look at our 25 budget, what would that do to the cost structure for each of those programs? But more importantly, where I really want to have the focus is this stabilization. And my own experience with the hospice with 3 relatives that had hospice services, those programs were in place for a long time, and they had a lot of support in the community, and they had a lot of support in the medical community. They were early access. It happened to be in a state where people were referred in much earlier than they are here. So they were able to bill Medicare for services during this 180-day incident window that they had and so forth. And we need to have a plan. We need to have, when we communicate to the assembly about what a plan, how we do that, we need to say, here's what a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan would look like. So let's use the longer horizon. And I know that it's an estimate, but, and build some assumptions into it that are assuming that, we increase from a 2-week window to a 6-week, whatever you want to do but we need to know, here's what we think the revenues or expenses are going to be. So we have something we communicate to the assembly, and also that we have something to work for there. We've heard from a possible operator that's interested in home care, maybe hospice. And I want to have a little bit more information about that. I don't feel like we've had any information there yet. Not blaming anything, we just need to get that. So Crisis Now, and I listened to the gentleman from NAMI who talked about the other statewide programs. And Kim, I think this is probably more directed at you. I don't know what information is out there. The only one that I'm familiar with, frankly, it's just one example, is PCHS in Soldotna, Peninsula Community Health Services. And I'm pretty sure that's at FQHC, and they receive funding for crisis services there. But can you give us a list on the 24th of who's operating these programs, what their funding sources are, and how they're able to sustain it? What makes them different from us? And is it time? Is it the model's wrong? We need to have a different, do we put this into a nonprofit entity that is an FQHC that is able to get special funding source? I mean, that's what I'm kind of looking for on that front. So RRC, I'll just tell you that I think that from where I sit, we need to inform the assembly they just need to refund that program. So that's a little simpler. I don't see a lot of changes there. I think we've got a fairly good model that's being operated well over there, and you just don't have the funding that comes in for those. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Max. You can do that. Any other board comment? Dr. Jones.
So I just want to talk a little bit about crisis stabilization. And I think as a board member, so as far as the ER position, we are very committed to the Crisis Now model. Not sending cops to bring people to the ER and not have them sit in the ER for hours and being sent back home. So what I don't know is the model that we set up on the crisis stabilization unit, if it makes sense for Juneau. I don't think it does, because, frankly, what I found is that it's really hard for me to find a person that will fit in the way we have it set up. So regardless of the decision that this board decides to make about the crisis stabilization unit the way it is right now, I am committed as a board member. We have this facility and we to continue to engage into how do we make it work for the community? And along with that, how do we engage with the CCFR and the police department so that we can get, which is the one big factor missing with that, is that person to go to the crisis at the house, not bring the person into our house. So, so again, I really think that if whatever decision we need to make as a board, we need to say, how can we make this work in a way? Because I think the model that we got put together isn't working. Part of the reason is the model doesn't make sense. Part of the reason is we don't have certain components of that, particularly at crisis intervention team. So anyway.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Anybody else? Anybody online? Deb, did you want to speak, sir? Deb.
I don't have a lot to add to what's been said. Everyone has spoken eloquently. But I agree that the bottom line, there is a couple of things that I would echo is that it's been the toughest decision that we have faced, those of us who've been on the board for a while, since we've been on the board. What do you cut? I would echo what everyone else has said. Every single one of these programs is personal to me. During COVID, my husband was one of those long-term the med unit waiting to get into first home care and then hospice for weeks and weeks. I got the phone call that you finally got a nurse 3 days after he passed at the hospital. But it's the same. I would agree that every one of us has been touched by mental illness, by substance use disorder, and I'm no exception to that. We don't want any of these in our community, but we can't fund them in with our current funding structure. Max said it the best with Rainforest Recovery. We just need to have CBJ start funding us again. There's really no other option for us. Short of somebody standing up to take over the Rainforest Recovery Center. We've listened to all of your comments and all of the comments that we've received online. Everyone has spoken eloquently. It's a lot to think about, and we really appreciate everything that everyone has said. I don't think at this point, there's no epiphany as to what we're going to be able to do. It's going to be a lot of conversation for us, and reach out to the rest of the community. If it hasn't spoken to us through the 19th, we are taking comments through the 19th. So please, anyone else who wants to weigh in, we'd appreciate it. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Deb. Any other board members? Thank you. I just want to reiterate what Deb and Max and the rest of the board said. Every one of these programs I know is personal to every one of us. And I know it's personal to our community too, that we make some really tough choices here and do what's best for the long-term sustainability of our community hospital. So I just want to thank you all very much for coming today. I want to thank the board of directors for coming again today and online, and of course our staff for coming. Everybody, thank you very much for being here. Please continue letting us know. We're read everything that you get. You're all very dedicated people here to making sure that our community is sustainable for generations to come. Thank you all. We are.
Good job, Kenny.